Cowboys will place the franchise tag on wide receiver George Pickens today to secure his rights at least through 2026, according to sources. So we knew this could be a possibility. Obviously, Stephen Jones told us last week this is what they were leaning towards, and now it becomes official that the Cowboys will franchise tag George Pickens for this upcoming year. Peter, what is your reaction?
That this is expected, but also get ready, buckle up, because George Pickens is the next Cowboy in line that we've seen offseason drama over the last couple of years. It started with Dak a couple of times, never drama with Dak, but it dragged on. Then it was obviously Ezekiel Elliott, CeeDee Lamb, and last year Micah Parsons, which ended a different way than the others when he actually was traded away. George Pickens, no player wants to necessarily be franchise tagged. George Pickens' agency also represents Micah Parsons. Will make a very interesting conversation with the Dallas Cowboys franchise. But this could drag on quite a bit, and we could be talking about whether George Pickens is at OTAs, whether he is at training camp, and then the question of, okay, how is this going to be settled? Do they eventually have to capitulate and give him that big deal? Truth of the matter is, George Pickens did everything he possibly could have done last year in a show-me year and still didn't get that big deal from the Cowboys. I'm very curious to see if and when George Pickens does show up to Cowboys camp.
Yeah, look, teams always know a lot about what it is that would make them hesitant to go ahead and commit long-term money, long-term guaranteed money to a player than we know. There's always things behind the scenes that either will make them say, hey, you know what? We are willing to go ahead and extend and sign a player to a long-term deal. Or, you know what? We want to hedge our bets and maybe just put the franchise tag on him, although that's cost prohibitive too. I mean, we're talking about carrying a one-year tag at $29 million. You think Dallas really wants to do that? Of course they don't want to do that, considering all the other things that they need to get done. You think they want to continue to just restructure contracts, try and manufacture ways to get under the salary cap, and then just kind of like pay as you go year by year? Of course they don't want to do that. They'd love for this to be cut and dried. But look, there's a lot of different things at play here. One, George has an argument for wanting to be paid like a number one wide receiver. He earned that this year. Dallas knows that. Of course they know that. But they already are paying a guy $33+ million per year. It probably just doesn't make it's not something that really is kind of wise team building, but they also don't want to let him go. Number two, look, contracts are about there's a certain amount of risk that you assume once you don't have the carrot dangling in front of a player any longer and they have secured long-term financial stability. And with George, you think that for a second, you think Dallas isn't considering that right now, considering what his past was in Pittsburgh? Of course they are. This isn't easy at all. And as Peter has alluded to, as Adam has said, Schefter has said, as Mike Tannenbaum has said, this is going to be a long process, a very long process, because there are a lot of concerns on both sides here before that need to really be kind of smoothed out before we arrive at long-term future fair value. There just is.
It's going to be a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. And here's why. Because it's inviting more drama. It's ensuring that the Dallas Cowboys are going to do what they do better than anybody in the National Football League. Win in terms of quantity of headlines, but not necessarily on the football field. It's going to be listen, we saw a couple of games last year where, listen, I got mad love for George Pickens. The brother's a stud. He's got a great agent in Mulugeta. We all know this. Somebody that Jerry didn't want to negotiate it because that's the same guy that represents Micah Parsons. We get all of that, okay? But here's the reality that's inescapable. In the end, we saw George Pickens on the field on at least a couple occasions where his effort was being questioned. We heard about his petulance in Pittsburgh. I'm not telling you that's a reason he doesn't deserve his money. I'm making the case for, that because that's the situation, he's going to be out there making business decisions. And we know what I mean by that. When you're going across that middle, when you're putting your body on the line, when you're endangering yourself, how anxious are you going to be to do that when you're trying to position yourself to get a long-term bag? Peter, Lewis, we know I'm not making this up. We know this comes with the game. When you franchise a guy, you're basically saying, okay, here's your money for the year. But there's a boatload of money out there to get for the next 3, 4, 5 years. and you're not giving this individual access to that, particularly after a year like this, he's like, okay, I went out there, I balled out, I went all out. I produced for this team. Wasn't my fault we lost. Wasn't CeeDee Lamb's fault we lost. Wasn't Dak Prescott's fault we lost. It was really the fact that we didn't have a defense, okay? So we did our job, and now I got to suffer. I got to suffer because of the decisions that they want to make, and you're just going to ignore this all-out year that I had with 93 receptions, 429 yards, and I had 73 first downs. I had 9 touchdowns. You're not going to pay me now? You're not going to pay me now. When are you going to pay me? You'll never pay me because I ain't Dak Prescott. I ain't the quarterback. I'm a wide receiver. I'm an expendable piece. So guess what? I got to make sure I position myself where I go someplace where I'm not deemed as expendable. That's what he's going to be out on the field doing at increments. We all know it's going to happen because that's what happens when you shortchange a dude financially on the football field. They make business decisions for their own future. That is what happens. It's a huge mistake by the Dallas Cowboys, but it's indicative of who they are and how they do business. They will certainly win headlines, and they will garner more headlines because we're going to be wondering about the stuff that I just said. And as a result, every newspaper around, every television network around is going to be talking about them. And that's where they will win. But it won't be on the football field because business decisions are going to be made.
That's why Schrager started this segment by buckle up, but I think that's probably why it's going to feel like that. They have a long-term deal. If they're going to come to a long-term deal, they have until July 15th to do that. Otherwise, George Pickens will play on the tag this upcoming season. Coming up here.
Is likely to receive the franchise tag by Tuesday's deadline. Could skip the offseason program, potentially training camp. Yesterday, head coach Brian Schottenheimer asked about what could be a looming standoff.
Yeah, again, this is going to play out the way it's supposed to play out. GP loves football, and my relationship with GP doesn't change, just like it didn't change with CD or Dak or those guys that were going through certain things, and it's all part of the process. It's the business side of it, but hell, I was talking to CD last night, and so, it doesn't change.
It isn't the coach's problem, but it is a problem, and we'll see where it goes. It becomes his problem if it winds up like Micah Parsons did a year ago. And Mike Tannenbaum, you are not confident that this thing gets done without a whole bunch of drama.
That's exactly right. A year ago, Micah Parsons was easy. Make him the highest paid pass rusher, Greeny. We saw how that ended. In this situation, there is going to be a disparate point of view. The team is going to say, we have CeeDee Lamb, our number 1 receiver, and you're a great number 2, and that's about $28.7 million. George Pickens is going to say, did you watch the season last year? I'm a number 1 wide receiver. If you don't think so, let me go to the market, and I'll prove it to you. There'll be about a $12 million per year difference between the two sides, and I feel bad for our friend Brian Schottenheimer, who knows all too well what it's like to deal with contract issues at the Cowboys and other places. I think there's zero chance he's in the offseason program, and I think there's zero chance we see George Pickens before Labor Day.
Yeah, before Labor Day. Okay, we'll see. That Labor Day is an awful long way up. But Lewis, you're nodding your head. You see it that way as well?
True.
I absolutely do. Look, I mean, they're going to franchise him, right? But
Yes.
They don't want to have him on the franchise tag, $29 million cap hit for this year. They don't want that. But look, they're in a tough spot. George has got a very strong case, as Mike is laying out. He's going to want his 35, 36, 38 million per year, and he has a right to want it. I don't know how Dallas, quite honestly, really rectifies this situation. I really don't. I mean, this is the kind of the price of doing business. When you have two guys like CD and George who are top flight guys, you're going to have to make some hard choices, man. You just are. You can't have all of them. You can't have all the good players. I mean, you can sign them if you want. You're just going to have to take some losses other places. You just aren't. Your team's going to be all out of whack, and it's going to be unbalanced from a cap allocation standpoint. So, yeah, this is going to be fun to watch for us, not for them.
Not for Brian Schottenheimer. So to go back to Mike's point, Graziano, what are you hearing there?
Yeah, they'll franchise him. I think they'll be open to talking about a long-term deal, but I don't think it's priority number 1 for them. I think they feel like he's coming off a great year. He obviously came to them with some questions about, some things that had gone on in Pittsburgh, and I think they wouldn't mind seeing it again before deciding to commit long-term. So they'll franchise him, and it's really going to be up to him after that. There's nothing that requires him to